Hey, y'all. So glad you're here. I think that I may have told you that Tia was going to be on the podcast again. She was on the podcast with me. I bet it was over a year ago yeah, probably. It's
Yeah.
it's podcast number 38. Tia's awesome. So she wrote a book which I shared with you, and she can maybe talk a teeny bit about before she goes into her next endeavor. We're so excited to have her. And I think I pretty much introduced her in episode 38. I hope you'll go back and listen to it if you didn't yet. She has an amazing book. It's helped me so much. And I am excited to hear what she has to share with us today. So, Tia, can you tell a little bit about your book before we get into the
Yeah, it's called Patterns of Revelation and it's available on Amazon. And it was the first, the Lord asked me to do major things, but this one was so out of my wheelhouse and he helped me do it. And one thing has led to another. And now I sit here with the podcast. And I think in the last podcast, you said to me, this is going to be one of many for you, T. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is going to be the only one. And so here I sit. So,
You don't want to hang out with me. I might set you up
oh,
for
no, I'd love to hang out with you. I just don't, this podcast thing
more.
is, at least I figured out how to use a microphone this time. So
Okay,
it's all
well,
good.
her podcast is amazing, and she'll tell you about that and how to find her at the end. So she is doing the subject of thinning the veil on her podcast, right, Tia?
Right.
Is,
Correct. Yeah.
is that the name of it?
Thinning of the veil. Yep.
Of the veil. Okay. So if you have any interest in this subject, you want to start listening to her podcast. So, Tia, what is your definition of thinning the veil?
So to me, actually, it's just maybe more of an extension. It's kind of a synonym for patterns of revelation. It's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing. Um, the thinning of the veil, though, hyper focuses on the gathering of Israel in my mind. So it goes into a little bit more detail, but the patterns for the thinning of the veil and patterns for personal revelation are exactly the same.
Mm,
And so for me, it was just another way of saying revelation, but to bring people to understand the context of what I'm talking about it in. Because
okay.
personal revelation is revelation that you get for yourself, and the thinning of the veil it takes that one step further and is revelation that you receive on on behalf of others, which
Okay.
then helps your personal revelation.
Exactly. And helps you personally.
Correct. Yes.
So I've been asked, so I'm just going to ask this. Is this podcast replacing a book, or will you write a book on thinning the veil?
So I started the book Thinning of the
Mhm.
Veil because I was asked to write another book. And then it just my life got busy, YSA got busy, and then I started teaching institute. So it's actually this line upon line thing that God has just kind of led me in.
Mhm.
And what it came to basically is that the burden of the gathering of Israel, which are on the youth, which is and if you go watch my first or second podcast, that's how I describe it. But
Mhm.
it is they learn better through podcasts. So the Lord said to me, global and technology. And for me, that I tried to make it a book. Believe me, I wrestled with God on that because the putting my face and information out there is a nightmare. So
Right.
I think the Thinning of the Veil book may still be in, but I'm finding that the podcast allows me to expand further on subjects because I'm not limited to a short amount of time and I have the freedom to express myself a little bit different. So for right now, the Thinning of the Veil is just in podcast form and it could turn into book form. I don't know. The
Yeah.
Lord will tell me when that's going to happen.
Right. I had a feeling that was going to be your answer. I'm like, whatever the Lord tells her to do, she'll do.
Yes, but actually, to in a certain way, the thinning of the veil or the podcast is has been a little bit easier, other than learning all the apps and stuff. Yeah, but it's been easier for me because I can express myself a little bit more than I can in a book.
Yeah.
So
I'm
yeah,
loving it so far. So,
thank you.
what sorts of experiences does thinning the veil include? Like,
Um, I think. it's the same thing as revelatory experiences and that and personal revelation. So in the next podcast coming up, I'm actually going to be addressing what forms of revelation we should be expecting when we're talking about the thinning of the veil. And it's basically all the same. It's listening to the whisperings of the Holy Ghost, it's dreams, it's visions, it's hearing God's voice. It's just all encompassing, because the Lord does not dictate. Um, he doesn't say, "Oh, you can just receive revelation just this one way," right? He's going to give you revelation in any way that he deems necessary and of benefit for not only for you, but for your ancestors on the other side of the veil. And you'll get used to, but one set of revelation, like the whisperings of the Spirit, leads to hearing God's voice, which leads to dreams, which leads to visions. It's like a building block scenario. And if you're ignoring the whisperings of the Holy Ghost, there's no way you're going to jump to a dream on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the types of things that I talk about in the next podcast, actually, and understanding that when you do have an experience and you think, okay, is this a revelation or not? 100% it's God talking to you. But we just excuse it away as something weird, or
Mm-hmm.
I just had heartburn or something. So but it's all encompassing, really, and that's the expectation and the patterns in the scriptures. So
Yeah. So this is the next question that kind of leads to this. And is this just the pattern set up in your book? It says, what steps can you take to let the Lord know you're ready to have this kind of experience?
so I think it's the same, but especially in this scenario, when we're talking about the thinning of the veil through the gathering of Israel, the most important thing that you can do is first offer intercessory prayers on behalf of those on the other side of the veil. The power behind an intercessory prayer is so much more poignant than if you're praying for yourself, which sounds odd. But that's the pattern in the scriptures. You think about the intercessory prayer that Christ offered in his most dire need, and it was on behalf of all of us. So the first thing you can do is start to recognize and maybe get out of your own, like, I need help in my life, I need revelation for my life, and start seeking revelation on behalf of others and pray on behalf of others that you can receive revelation. And then the next thing is get your feet moving,
Mm-hmm.
because you can receive revelation. And if you don't have your feet moving and not doing it, the Lord's not going to give you more revelation. And also, sometimes these things take time, because the Lord says, are you serious about gathering Israel? So even if you feel like having revelatory experiences, if your feet are moving in the temple, you are then allowing yourself and in an environment where you can receive more revelation. So for me, I think those two things are the most important.
Okay. Can you tell me what an intercessory prayer would sound like? Like, just briefly, what does that even look like? Some people wouldn't know what that means.
Well, first of all, I would say go to the scriptures and
Mm-hmm.
look up all the intercessory prayers. And it's not like it is, you have to word it a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It is your desire to help gather Israel and to receive and know who needs help.
Mm-hmm.
And we give intercessory prayers on behalf of our children,
Right.
right? I mean, you know what kind of prayer that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the same feeling of longing and needing to help those on the other side of the veil, it's more about a desire, not necessarily about the words that you say. But I
Mm-hmm.
would say go to the scriptures, because the pattern exists in the scriptures, with the sons of Mosiah and
Mm-hmm.
Enos. Prayed on
Right.
behalf, right? And so go study those prayers. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the invitation that President Holland gave us about prayers is that if you study the pattern in the Lord's life, you can always find the answer to it. And he offered several intercessory prayers. One was in, on the Nephite continent when he came back on behalf of those who were there
Right.
with him. So study those and understand that those can be and usually are the most poignant, that the Lord answers
What
more
I've
than
been trying to
faster than
do
anything else.
from Elder Holland's talk is try to pray more out loud, because I don't pray out loud.
Right?
It's really
Yes.
awkward for me.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
he's try to pray out loud when you can. And I was like, I don't do that. I really don't. And so anyway, I've been working on that as
That's actually because that's the same thing. I was like, I mean, if I have a hard time praying out loud, I mean, can you imagine what this podcast is doing?
right.
But that was the takeaway that I took from it with a couple other things, not,
Mhm,
near death
mhm,
experience, which is cool. But
right.
for me, it's the intent and then also the ways. And the Lord will prompt you in different ways to pray at different times,
Mhm.
in different manners,
Yep.
and he'll like time frames, pray right this second, even though you're
Mhm.
not kneeling down. So that's just another one of those prayers that we can offer, and we don't realize, the name of it, but it's called an intercessory prayer. So,
Okay. Okay. So also, can you just mention the other prayer that you've shared with me about praying for the people you're doing the work for as you're in the temple? Can you share a little bit about that?
um, you mean with the bearing testimony or just praying for
Well,
them
yeah,
generally?
either way, anything you
Yes,
want to talk as far as, isn't that an intercessory prayer as well? Like when you're in
100%.
the temple and you have their name in your hand and you've taught me to pray for them. So what do
Yes.
you want to tell people about that?
So basically, what we're doing is kind of creating this eye of faith situation where we're saying, okay, I am going to recognize that this person could be like sitting next to me, right? And so we are putting it in our minds that that's what's happening, and then we are bearing testimony to that person, just like if there was an investigator sitting in front of you, it's not any different. So you bear your testimony to that person, and then what's cool is you can go up to the celestial room and pray for these people, and there have been times where I've been prompted to put their name in on the prayer roll.
Oh, wow.
And so it is just an extra step that you can do. And it creates this situation where these people become alive and real to you. And when you start praying on behalf of them, it's almost like you can start feeling their emotions and you can start feeling their longings. And that's the cool part about it, is that when in that moment that you start making them human and not just a name, that's when these thinning of the veil experiences happen. So when you're praying for them, when you're bearing testimony to them, then it is a situation where you can then, it's kind of like you're feeding or feeling each other's spirits,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing that you taught me is, I was 21 when I went on my mission. I'd been going, now I'm 51, so 30 years. And it's
Yeah,
only been since I had the conversations I've had with you that the name on the paper became a person to me.
right.
And it's been a completely different experience for me in the temple.
Yeah.
And
Well, and if you think, the prophet has said, he has made it very clear he's the prophet on for all people on both sides of the veil, right? So they are being encouraged, just like us, to understand the patterns of revelation, to hear him and hear his voice. So therefore we should not treat them any different, as if just because they're on the other side of the veil.
mhm.
There is no difference between us and them.
I've been inspired, whatever, given revelation to share this information with some moms in my ward. And interestingly, every single one has been a missionary mom. They have a missionary out right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like Heavenly Father's telling me to tell you that this is how you can gather right now while your kids are out gathering. For some reason, this is really important for you to start doing this gathering as you're asking them to do and talking to them every Monday about doing, through the discouragement and all of it. Like there's
Yeah.
some sacrifices you can make as well as a mom with a missionary out.
Well, and I don't think if there's any more of a bonding experience, and this then also, I have children on the other side of the veil, right, who are on missions, right? So this same experience that you're having in your ward with those moms bonding with their children, even though they're hundreds of miles away and they don't ever see them,
Mhm.
when you become involved in the same work that they're involved in, then you create this closeness and bond, and the spiritual side of things you both become accustomed to at the same time. And there is power in that, and there is family in that. And then, so if you do that with someone on the other side of the veil and you're interacting with them, like if I want to be close to my dad, the best way I found to do that is to gather Israel to be involved in his work, because then there's a reason for him to talk to me, and there's a reason for him to be involved in my life.
Love
So it's
that.
kind of cool that way.
So, in getting names ready to do the temple, this is kind of a big question.
Yeah.
What if the family has been researched a lot and it's, that's the only way that you know how to do it, or how
Yeah.
important is it connecting the right people to each other? How much time do we need to spend on research? How do you want to answer that?
Well, I want to say, first of all, we're not going to be done till the millennium is over. That's number one. And I came from a family like that where I thought, all the work was to be done. Um, but there is no physical way that the work can be done and will be done until the millennium. And what we don't understand is that they're in the cousin line. And the cool thing that's been given is this ordinance is ready button,
Hmm.
right? Because before I had to search and seek, which I think is actually has been helpful. But you can't overprogram someone and say, you've got to do all this research before. So the ordinance is ready button has been really good in saying, okay, these are your family members. Now ask about the ones that I've put in your hand and
Hmm.
see if you can receive revelation on behalf of those. And once someone gets a name, that tends to open a lot of opportunities. But most of them are in the cousin line. And I, not only with this next podcast, it's kind of a 2-for-1 situation where I do a how-to video where you just push this button and do this button, and this is where you find it, because I know that is a struggle for a lot of people. And
Hmm.
so I'm going to do more of those videos, but you know, just push the ordinances ready button, and then the Lord will teach you how to and where to research more if that's where you need to be. But
Love
what
that.
I would say that the worst thing that you can do is have fear and overwhelming, because I'm going to tell you right now, you will do something wrong. You will hook someone up the wrong way, but you can undo it. And that's the thing, is that all of these things are going to be worked out in the millennium, because there's going to be a lot of it's a hot mess, I think, but the Lord has a plan for that and he knows that. So just take the fear out of it and just start walking forward in faith. Satan is really good at adding fear to this genealogical thing, like an overwhelming, I can't do this. No, literally you just push the dang button.
Yeah.
So,
And then go do the work.
and go do the work,
Yeah.
because I mean, you can push the
So,
button all you want, but if you don't go do the work, then what's the point?
yeah. So, in talking with so many people about this, what do you think it, besides just being confused, overwhelmed, which I believe is indulgent emotions and they're from Satan, he'll have a spin in doubt and confusion forever if he can.
Forever. Yeah.
And so what is the opposition you've seen most besides spinning in confusion and overwhelm over this work from the people that you've taught?
Um, I think the worst thing is the unbelief scenario.
Mm,
Um, for years and for whatever reason, we've built up this, and I call it a wall of unbelief, where, okay, I can't have these experiences, or because they're only for certain people, right? And I've heard tons of people say to me, well, that's just your gift. And I'm
mhm.
like, this is, first of all, I didn't have this gift before I started doing temple and family history work. Second of all, I've been asking for this gift. And third, it says nothing about this in my patriarchal blessing. People are comfortable saying, okay, they read their patriarchal blessing and go, okay, well, then that's just all the gifts that I can have.
Right.
When in reality, it says in the scriptures, seek ye after the best gifts, which means seek these things for yourself. You are not just, some may have a propensity, but it takes work either way. And so the unbelief that this can't happen, and then the distraction that Satan says, it's not important for you to be in the temple. It's more important to go to this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. And we're all at different levels and stages in our life. We all have different time frames and different whatever. But when you make a commitment to the Lord about attending the temple and basically telling Satan to go pound sand, then that's when you are free to have the spirit of revelation into your life because you're not giving into the unbelief. And that's what it says in Ether 4:7 after Brother of Jared. Anyone can have this experience, but it does not come to them because of unbelief, not because of sin, but because
Mhm.
of unbelief. And so for me, I think that's been the biggest hump. And then you come up with all the little excuses. Well, my work is already done. I don't
Mhm.
have time, all those things. But it generally originates with that unbelief situation.
I have learned a ton about that. I was just reading, I was trying to find the quote, but I can't find it, but it was President Nelson, and it's in this week's Come Follow Me. We're, given a talk by him, and
Yeah.
he says that unbelief is the big problem too. That's what he says in
Well,
all work
either
he's
you
asking us
believe
to do.
right, and either you believe the scriptures and you believe the patterns or you don't. Or
Mm,
you say, "No, God is a liar and he is a respecter of persons."
mhm.
Right?
Yep.
Anyone can experience these, no matter the age, no matter the gender, no matter the situation that you're in your life, if you're simply growing into the principle of revelation, like President Nelson invites us to do, for
So
sure.
maybe we'll talk about this question that someone asked. Is this for all ages? Can children have these experiences?
You know what's awesome about kids is it happens to them almost immediately. And you know this, right?
Mhm.
You've told me about some of the experiences that you've had with your children, and I've
Mhm.
heard it from others. And again, in that YSA situation, it would happen almost immediately. And I think that's because of the unbelief. You tell your kid, your child, okay, well, you can go have this experience. And they say, okay, I can.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
go and they ask, and the Lord answers that prayer. And yet we sit and stew in, well, these are younger kids. They're going to be what save us, honestly. So, yes, it's God is no respecter of persons and he's no respecter of age.
Love that.
And the pattern in the Book of Mormon says those children in the Nephite, in the, I just lost my train of thought. In the Nephite continent,
Mhm.
those kids, what happened to them?
Yep.
Angels, they saw things, they heard things that cannot be uttered. So this is 100% for kids, and I even think more so for them.
Yeah.
And that's why President Nelson addressed the hope of Israel to the children of the church.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would agree with you for sure. So how about this one? Do people on the other side want to connect with us and are there, but unless we are open to it or in the right headspace, we can't see them?
100% they're trying to connect. You think about if you always take it in context of you wanting to speak to your children and connect with your children, no one's going to say no to that. Right? So
Mhm.
just because they have a veil doesn't mean they are any less wanting for their children on the other side. And especially because you may be the only one of their descendants that can bring them back to the patriarchal order of which they're striving for. So you can bet that they are praying for you and you can bet that they are helping you in different areas and aspects so that you can go get the job done. They
Mhm.
absolutely 100% are aware of you. They care for you. And especially if you're helping them,
Mhm.
their prayers ascend to God and they have to be answered just as much. And it's their intercessory prayer for us.
Mm.
They're offering intercessory prayers on behalf of us, which need to be answered as well.
That
So it
makes
goes
a
both
lot of
ways.
sense. Right.
Yeah,
Like they without us cannot be made perfect and us without them cannot be made perfect.
correct.
I never quote it right, but it's something around along those lines I
Yeah.
felt strongly too.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing is that through these experiences, you can feel that love for you, right?
Mhm.
You can feel the their yearnings and longings for you. And that is an added blessing, especially in this crazy world where there is so much contention and people may not like you or people may think something else. If you have those extra blessings from the other side of the veil from those, you aren't so lonely
Mhm.
and isolated.
Yeah. That's a really good point that I've never thought of, but I have had experiences with feeling them help me for
Yep.
sure.
Yep. Yep.
So, how do you prepare yourself to see angels? Or are they usually people we were close to before this life, or relatives, or
In my experience, generally it's family members, and sometimes it's those that you know, and sometimes it's those that you don't know. I have had experiences where they're not family members. Um, I think, but I think there's some kind of connection or they wouldn't have come, right? I don't know if they're. So I think the way that you can prepare is just the same way that you prepare to receive any kind of revelation, because it's just a form of revelation. So
Mm,
if you're preparing to receive revelation through the whisperings of the Holy Ghost, then you're also preparing for receiving angelic ministrations when God deems it necessary.
mhm,
So, and sometimes, sometimes it's surprising to me. And then sometimes the thing is once you get used to the way the Spirit speaks, then you can almost feel some things coming sometimes. It's
mhm,
almost like it's like, okay, I need to put myself in a place where I can receive this revelation because I can feel that it's coming, and a headspace and a place. Other times, it will be surprising, but a lot of times it comes in the temple, which that's the expectation. I mean, if you can't feel the veil thin in your home life, go to the temple and you'll get used to what that feeling is so that you can replicate that in your house.
that's a really good point too.
So,
Mhm,
because it's abnormal for a mortal, right? That's not a normal thing for us. If we will go put ourselves in a place where the veil is naturally thin anyways,
mhm.
because it's a house of God, then you can go replicate it and you get used to that feeling.
Yeah,
So,
that's interesting. I've read a bunch and about the brethren lately of like be careful what you watch. What are you
yeah.
is it inspiring and uplifting? Should you be watching it? And there was this series I was into, and as I was watching, I'm like, I don't think this is probably a good series. And I don't think the spirit is here.
Yeah.
And so I prayed about it and asked Heavenly Father, and my answer was, would you watch this if you were in the temple? Can you
Oh,
imagine
yeah.
this if you were within the walls of the temple? That was the reply. And I was like, I think I'm done with that series. Like, it's definitely not a space. If you want your home to be like the temple,
Yeah.
that would not be something you'd be watching.
Exactly. And I think that's a good like measuring stick, you know?
Mhm.
But of course, we're not going to be perfect,
Right.
and things aren't, and the Lord understands that and knows that. And I don't want people to get like, I
No.
have to do all these things perfectly for this to happen, because that's not the case.
Mhm.
But yes, but once you start understanding these things and want more of those, then you purposefully start making choices that encourage more of those things to come and are
Right.
more aware of them.
And that's kind of what that experience was for me. I'm like, I'm just not feeling the promptings like I was. I'm not
Yes.
feeling as close to God as I was.
Yeah.
What's happening? And then the thought of this series came to my head, and that's where that went. But of course, you don't sit at home and watch the temple movie or like
Yeah.
clearly that's not, but I have started
Yeah.
to really, really be careful about what I'm watching.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah. And listening to. It's
Yes,
just everywhere.
I don't want to watch or listen to things that I know are driving the spirit for me because
Yeah.
I'm working so hard to have the spirit with me
Right.
and be worthy
Yeah,
of that.
for sure.
So I can have these experiences. So
Yeah.
this is another question from someone. What if we're afraid to thin the veil? Have you ever been shown or known things that you don't really want to? Or is it sort of like not getting more than you can handle?
Well, two things. First of all, we have to be aware that there's opposition in all things and ever will be, right? And that's part of the growth process. If you know that that's part of it, I think that's the first step in like combating, because there will be some things that will happen that you're like, oh, I don't know about that. That's a little bit, I'm not sure. And you get kind of uneasy about it. And when Joseph Smith said it will come as fast as you're able to bear it, that is truly 100% a thing. This this revelation does not come without work and does not come without opposition, because you can have a glorious magnificent experience. And then right after, Satan's going to rail and do whatever he's going to do. I mean, that's evidence, obviously, with Moses, right? He had this experience with God, and then, Satan comes and tries to tell him that he's something. So if you know that going in, then you can recognize it coming in, and you don't freak out as much. And then also the next thing that I would suggest is I am continually and always praying for the gift of discernment, because I want to know if I am being deceived or not being deceived. And, the Lord, it's pretty obvious when you're having experiences that are not from God, that Satan's trying to replicate. But again, as you get more experience with that, I have noticed that Satan will try different ways. But as soon as I know that I have more power over Satan, then that kind of goes away. But yes, those experiences, you can expect that those experiences will happen in some form or another, because Satan doesn't want you to thin the veil. He wants it to be as thick as it can be, because he
Mm-hmm.
can keep you, um, he can keep you from who you are and what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. And the
So,
blessings that you can receive if
correct.
you are following, inspiration and revelation.
Yeah.
So is it okay to ask for specific experiences?
100%. I think, but know that the Lord is going to give it to you line upon line, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not obeying the small whisperings, you're not going to be given dreams. But if you say to the Lord, hey, whenever you're ready, I am open to being communicated. And then you take the steps that show him that you're open to it, which means you put a pen and a paper by your bed, or you purposely put your phone by your bed. With the intent that if you receive something, because that's the another eye of faith, that you're going to receive these things.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it's completely, it's the ask, seek, and knock situation. And I'm astounded when I talk to someone and they're like, well, I'm not supposed to ask for these things. And I'm thinking, show me in the scriptures where it says that.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in the scriptures does it say that. He will give you according to your needs and the time frame that he deems for your eternal, progress. But 100% you should be asking for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, asking with the intent to do. Because if you're just asking to just have a dream or just hear God's voice just because that's cool, I want that experience, you will not be given that. The
Mm-hmm.
intent behind it is that you're going to do the work that he's asked you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because he'll stop giving it to you at some point if you won't listen to what he's telling you.
Right. That's a really good point. Okay, I have a couple more.
Okay.
What is your favorite thinning of the veil experience in the scriptures?
Hands down, brother of Jared. And the reason why I say that is because in him having that experience, he could not be kept from within the veil, which says to me there is a law that it's predicated on. And once that law is obeyed, then it can be given. And then follows Ether 4:7, which says anyone can have these experiences. They just have to exhibit the amount of faith. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this was put in, Moroni put this in here for a reason, right? And it says specifically that anyone can have this experience. And
What
he could not be kept within the bell. And for me, I'm like, how do I live that law so that I cannot be kept from within the bell either?
right. So what comes to your mind as what you need to do to be in that spot that he was in?
You do what the prophet's been telling you to do and grow into the principle of revelation. Because if you look at the pattern, the little information that we have of the brother of Jared, and you looked at if you look at the pattern, it is all about prayer, right? He did all of these things that the prophet is telling us to do. Formula is no different. And
Mm-hmm.
then he was put in a situation where he had to trust God. And there are
Mm-hmm.
so many times in our lives where we don't want to be put in those relationships or in that position to trust God.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is everyone prays for a miracle, but they don't want to have the need for one. But that's what the definition of a miracle is
Mm-hmm.
that the that you need one. So
Yeah.
let's quit praying away, like not having to interact with the Lord because we want a miracle, but we don't want to have one.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, if it is an eternal principle and law, then it's something I can attain to. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's cool that like he's got a cool name
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah. He really does. There's just that.
I'm just like, and then there's that. So, I don't know. That's my favorite one, but I'm just astounded at all of the experiences that are over and over again, thinning of the veil experiences.
Yeah. They're now that I've started to search for them, it's
They're
pretty
everywhere.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
everywhere in the scriptures.
Yeah.
But I think we get the impression, well, these are prophets, and that's why they're having these experiences. They are in the Book of Mormon or the Bible for a reason because they were these amazingly spiritual people who that's why they got
And
to have.
and I think we do that because it's more comfortable to do that and it's not hard work, so we don't have to do the hard work. And I
Mhm,
also think that Satan is really good at saying it's only for these people. But if you look at the people, Nephi was just a kid from Jerusalem. Like
mhm,
he was like in the totality of living in Jerusalem, he really was a nobody, really. But he became someone, and I think that is it goes back to the biggest problem that we have is unbelief, not unbelief that it isn't happening, but that it can't happen to us. Because Moses said, "Would to God that all the Lord's people were prophets."
and
So
Moses,
therefore, that's our
yeah,
invitation.
yeah, and Moses on the flip side, he wasn't a young boy. He was 40 before he ever left Egypt. He was
Right.
40 plus before he ever had experiences with
Right.
that he had. So
Yeah.
we can't really look at age in this
No, it has
because
nothing to do with age.
mm-mm,
Nothing to do with age. And if you're going to find a reason why you can't have these experiences, you'll find it.
mhm,
Satan will just hand them to you on a platter.
mhm,
But if you're looking for the reasons why you should be having these experiences, then it's everywhere. And I think that was the impetus for me doing this podcast was to help that unbelief dissipate in people's lives. Look, I'm a nobody, really, right? And so I don't have a degree, I don't have all these things, but what I am doing is gathering Israel. And that is the promise that we've been invited to participate in, and then also participate in the greatest manifestations. I mean, how in the world the prophet says that? And you're like, well, that's cool. No, it's not cool. You're going to either be participating or you're not.
mhm,
So we will parse everything till kingdom come,
mhm.
until you get to the point to where you're done parsing and you want to accept the invitation.
Yeah. And it's going to be one way or the other. Like all of
For
us are
sure.
going to have to decide. At this point, it's getting down to the wire and we're going to have to choose a side.
Yeah. Well, why do you think the prophet is saying urgent? I
Mhm,
mean, last hour of like he's using all of these time frame scenarios to let you know where we're at, and you don't have time to parse anymore.
mm-mm,
You don't. So I don't know. But I get it because I used to have it myself.
mhm.
So, and that's hopefully what people will get from the podcast is that this can happen to normal people.
And I think that is your greatest gift that you're giving to everyone is
Oh,
you
thanks.
can just be like me, like all of us are on equal ground with God. He's no respecter of persons, and we
Yeah,
can experience these things, every
right.
single one of us.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we are here at the end. So can you tell them how to find you, how to start listening to your podcast on Thinning the Veil, and just share a little bit of that before we end?
Yeah. So if you go to thinningoftheveil.com, and again, that's with two N's, thinningoftheveil.com, it will take you to to my website. And basically you can choose what you want to do from there. If you want to listen through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I also have a YouTube channel called Thinning of the Veil. And I think if you go to my website, you can access it there too. When you're on YouTube, though, there's a podcast section and a video section, and one is just listening and one is watching. So you can access it anywhere, anytime. I think that's what the great thing is about the podcast situation is that you can listen to it anywhere. I listen to podcasts when I'm doing other things. So that's, I think that's what's really, really helpful. And for me, it's been another walk with God, honestly.